My son-in-law shoved me into the wall of my own garage, hard enough that my shoulder cracked against the shelving unit and 3 mason jars hit the concrete floor. I didn't say a word, I just watched him leave. The next morning I drove to his office and left a small wooden box on his secretary's desk. He called me 2 hours later, laughing. "Finally came to your senses, old man?" he said. He thought it was cash. He was still laughing when he opened it. Then the line went completely silent. Before we go any further, please subscribe to Pure Revenge Stories and drop a comment telling me what time it is where you are right now. I love knowing who's out there listening. I was reorganizing my wood shop when my son-in-law's truck pulled into the driveway that Saturday afternoon. I heard it before I saw it that lifted F-250 he'd bought on credit 6 months after the wedding, chrome rims catching the Denver sun. I am 63 years old, retired electrician, 38 years running wire through walls before my knees told me it was time to stop. I've got a wood shop in my garage where I build furniture. Nobody asked me to build. End tables, rocking chairs, a jewelry box last Christmas for my daughter that she cried over. That shop is mine. Every tool in its place, every clamp labeled, sawdust smelling like order. My daughter came through the side door first, the way she always did, not knocking because she grew up here. She was carrying a casserole dish covered in foil. My son-in-law came in behind her empty-handed, which told me everything I needed to know about the kind of afternoon this was going to be. "Hey, Dad," she kissed my cheek. "Made that chicken thing you like." He stood near my workbench with his hands in his jacket pockets, looking at my tools the way a man looks at something he's calculating the resale value of. He was 34, sales manager at some medical device company downtown, dressed like he was going to a business lunch even on a Saturday. "Sal," he said. That was it. Just my name. Not hello, not how are you. I set down the spokeshave I'd been cleaning. "What brings you two out here?" My daughter started toward the kitchen with the casserole. My son-in-law stayed put. "Actually," he said, "we were hoping to talk to you about something." That something turned out to be $17,000. He laid it out the way he always did, confident, leaning against my workbench like he owned it, one boot crossed over the other. His company was expanding into orthopedic devices. New territory. He needed to front his own sample inventory to land the bigger accounts. Temporary, 60 days max. The commission alone would pay me back double. He had numbers on his phone, projections. He showed me the screen but didn't hand it to me. My daughter stood in the kitchen doorway. She was watching the floor. I said, "How much do you still owe me from the bathroom renovation loan?" His jaw shifted. That was different. That was family, helping family get started. That was $9,000, I said. 18 months ago. We've had some setbacks. His voice went flat. The way it did when he didn't like being held accountable for things. You know that. "I know what I know," I said. And the answer is no. The temperature in my garage dropped about 20 degrees. He pushed off the workbench and took 2 steps toward me. He was 6'1" and had 40 pounds on me, and I could tell he knew it. "Dad," he used that word like a warning. "You're being selfish. You're sitting here playing with wood while your daughter and I are trying to build something. Some fathers actually invest in their kids' future." My daughter said his name quietly from the doorway. He didn't look at her. He looked at me. When I said no again, slower this time, he reached past me and swept my spokeshave off the bench. It hit the floor and slid under the table saw. Then his hand came up and shoved me, both palms flat against my chest, and I went back hard into the shelving unit. The mason jars came down. My shoulder caught the metal bracket edge, and I felt it immediately. Deep and sharp. The kind of pain that doesn't peak right away but promises it will. He looked at his own hands, like he was surprised by them. My daughter made a sound I'd never heard her make before. Small and high. "Get out," I said. My voice was level. Same voice I used for 40 years when a job site got dangerous. Calm. Clear. "Get out of my shop." He left without another word. She stayed behind, one hand on the doorframe, looking at me with an expression I couldn't read, and didn't have the energy to try to. "Dad, I'm so sorry. He's under so much pressure right now. He didn't mean..." I picked up the mason jars, 2 intact, 1 broken. I swept the glass with the shop broom. She stood there watching me clean up after her husband. "Go home, sweetheart," I said. "We'll talk later." She left. I locked the shop door, sat down on my stool, and pressed my hand against my shoulder. Then I took out my phone and called the only attorney I knew personally, a man named Gerald Ostroff, who'd done the estate paperwork when my wife passed 4 years ago. Gerald was 68, and had seen most things. "Gerald," I said when he picked up, "my son-in-law just assaulted me in my own garage." Pause. "Did you call the police?" "Not yet. I wanted to call you first." "That's actually smart. Tell me everything." I told him. He asked if I had any documentation, any witnesses. I said no to both, then stopped. Thought about it. My shop camera. I had installed a small security camera after a tool theft 2 years ago, mounted in the upper corner above the door, wide angle, records to a cloud app on my phone. I'd forgotten it was there, the way you forget a smoke detector until the battery dies. I pulled up the app while Gerald waited, found the footage, watched my son-in-law's hands come up, watched myself hit the shelving unit, watched the jars fall. "Gerald," I said, "I have it on video. The whole thing." His tone shifted into something sharper. "Send it to me right now. Don't post it anywhere. Don't show anyone. Don't tell him you have it. Can you do that?" I could do that. The next morning I drove to Gerald's office in Cherry Creek. He'd already reviewed the footage 3 times and printed still frames. We sat across from each other at his conference table with coffee going cold between us. "This is a clean case," he said. "Clear video, identifiable subject, documented injury if you got checked out." I had gone to urgent care the night before. Contusion to the right shoulder, possible minor separation, ice and rest recommended, follow-up if pain worsened. I had the paperwork. "Gerald," I said, "I don't just want to file charges." He looked at me over his glasses. "I want to deliver the news myself." He set his pen down. "Why?" "Because he needs to see my face when he realizes what's in the envelope." Gerald studied me for a long moment. He'd known me since my wife's last year, through the worst of it, and he had the particular patience of a man who understands grief makes people want something to control. He didn't try to talk me out of it. He said, "You deliver it. You walk away. No words, no confrontation. You hand it over and leave. Can you do that?" I told him yes. And I meant it. I actually meant it. I drove to my son-in-law's office building in the tech corridor off I-25 the next day. Glass and steel, company logo on the directory. Visitor parking validated. His secretary was a young woman with reading glasses pushed up on her head. I gave her the wooden box, one I'd made myself. Small, plain, fitted lid, and I said it was a personal delivery for him from his father-in-law. She smiled and said she'd make sure he got it right away. I was in the elevator going down when my phone rang. He answered like a man who'd already won something. "Finally decided to help us out?" I said nothing. I could hear him opening the box, the soft pop of the fitted lid. "What is this?" His voice changed. "What is this as a court summons?" "Criminal complaint," I said. "Assault and battery. The hearing date is on the 2nd page." A long silence. "You're out of your mind." I pressed the lobby button again, even though it was already lit. "You shoved me into my own shelving unit," I said. "I have it on video from start to finish." Another silence. Longer. "I want to have a conversation about this. Come back up. Just come up and we can..." I said goodbye and ended the call. In my truck in the parking garage, I sat with both hands on the wheel. Gerald's instructions had been exact. Deliver. Leave. No engagement. I'd done 2 out of 3. Telling him about the video was the 3rd mistake I wasn't supposed to make. I called Gerald from the garage. I told him about the camera footage. His pause said everything before his words did. "Sal, I know." "What did he say?" "He wanted me to come back up." "Did you?" "No." Gerald exhaled. "Okay. It's done now. We manage it. Go home and don't respond to anything he sends you." He sent 42 text messages in the next 6 hours. I counted because Gerald asked me to screenshot everything. The first ones were confused, then angry, then threatening, then briefly apologetic in a way that felt like strategy, then threatening again. My daughter called 4 times. I let them go to voicemail. I sat in my kitchen eating a sandwich I couldn't taste, looking at the photo of my wife on the refrigerator. She'd been gone 4 years. Ovarian cancer, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She never met our son-in-law. My daughter had started dating him 8 months after the funeral, and I'd always quietly thought that timing mattered, that grief makes people reach for whoever's nearest and most certain. He had been certain. I'd give him that. He'd walked into our family like he already owned a room in it. My daughter's 5th call, I answered. "Dad, what is happening?" "He's saying you're having him arrested." "Criminal charges," I said. "Yes." "Over a push?" "He barely touched you." He was frustrated. He put me into a metal shelving unit hard enough to knock 3 jars off the shelf. "I have the video." Silence on her end. "Dad, if you do this, It will destroy everything we're trying to build. It's already built wrong, sweetheart. That's the problem. She hung up. I sat in the kitchen until dark. Didn't turn on lights. My shoulder ached in a low, constant way. I thought about calling Quinn, my son in Albuquerque, then decided against it. Not yet. Not until I understood what I was actually doing. My phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Text message. Mr. Caldwell. You don't know me, but I know what your son-in-law did to you because he did something similar to me 2 years ago. If you're taking him to court, I'd like to talk. My name is Dennis Park. I worked with him at his previous company. A photo attached. Medical record. Workplace incident report. Date stamped. Describing a shoving incident in a parking structure. Employee name. Dennis Park. Aggressor described but not named in the public portion of the document. I stared at it for a long time. Then I read Gerald's earlier advice back to myself in my head. No emotional decisions. I set the phone on the counter and went to bed. I didn't sleep. At 2 a.m, I typed back. Can we meet? Send. Gerald's office the next afternoon, and I watched his face change as he read Dennis Park's documents across the conference table. Dennis was 40, Korean American, former logistics coordinator, methodical in the way of someone who'd been waiting for a reason to finally use what he'd saved. He'd kept everything. Incident report, his own photos of bruised ribs, email chains showing the escalation before the physical moment. Gerald looked up from the folder. How did the physical incident occur? Parking structure, Dennis said. I found expense reports he'd been falsifying. Brought them to him privately, gave him a chance to explain. He grabbed me by the jacket and threw me against a concrete pillar. 2 cracked ribs. He told HR I slipped. Did anyone see it? One witness. A junior analyst who was too afraid of his job to say anything officially. Did you file charges? He paused. No. He threatened to countersue for defamation. Said he had friends in management, that I'd never work in medical device sales again in Colorado. I had a family to feed. I signed a separation agreement. Gerald looked at me. This establishes pattern. Enough pattern for the DA? Pattern of violence in professional and personal relationships. Same method, same trigger, money, and control. The DA will want this. Dennis looked at me directly. I stayed quiet for 2 years. I watched him move on and do it again. I'm not staying quiet anymore. I reached across the table and shook his hand. 2 days later, I got a call from a number with an Albuquerque area code I didn't recognize. A woman named Frances Dominguez. She said she was the mother of one of my son-in-law's former girlfriends, a woman he dated for 2 years before meeting my daughter. She'd heard, through a friend of a friend, that there was a legal case. She'd been waiting for a legal case. He borrowed $4,500 from my daughter, she said. Said it was for a security deposit on an apartment they were going to share. He kept the money, ended the relationship, blocked her phone number. When my daughter tried to reach him through his workplace, he told his manager she was harassing him and had her calls screened. My daughter was 26 years old and too embarrassed to tell anyone. I said, "Why are you telling me now?" "Because I'm 61 years old," she said, "and I have been waiting for someone to make this right. My daughter still cries about it. Not the money. The humiliation." I wrote down her number, told Gerald the same afternoon. He leaned back in his chair. "You've been busy." "I've been patient for 2 years," I said. "I'm done being patient." He studied the ceiling for a moment. "Sal, I have to tell you something, and you're not going to like it." I waited. "Your daughter called my office this morning." I set down my coffee. "She asked me to withdraw from your representation. Said she was going to provide testimony that the incident was a misunderstanding. Said you've been struggling since your wife's death, and your perception of events may not be reliable." The word reliable sat in the room between us. "She said that?" Gerald looked at me with the careful face of a man who respected me enough not to soften it. Those were her words. Yes. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, Cherry Creek in late October. Leaves coming down, a couple walking a dog. Everything ordinary. "He got to her," I said. Gerald said nothing, which was its own kind of answer. That night, my son-in-law left a voicemail. Calm voice. Reasonable voice. He used it the same way he'd used his hands, deliberately. "Sal, I think we've both had time to cool down. I want to apologize for what happened in your shop. I was out of line. I know that. I'm asking you man to man to let this go. For our family's sake. For your daughter's sake. I've already talked to a family therapist about anger management. I just want us to move forward. You've made your point. I hear you. I played it twice, Heard the calculation in every sentence. The apology contained no admission. The therapy was preemptive, something to cite in court. The appeal to my daughter was a warning about what he'd already done. I forwarded it to Gerald with one line. He's coaching her. Gerald replied in 15 minutes. Agreed. Saves it. The pretrial hearing at Denver County Courthouse was on a Thursday morning in November. Gerald wore a dark suit. I wore the same sport coat I'd worn to my wife's memorial, the one she'd picked out for me 2 Christmases before she got sick. I don't know why I chose it. Something about needing her there. Across the aisle, my son-in-law sat with his attorney, a younger man who carried himself like someone who billed aggressively. My son-in-law looked composed. Expensive haircut, calm hands on the table. He didn't look at me. The video played on the courtroom monitor. Gerald had requested it be shown in full. 58 seconds of footage. I watched the jurors watch my son-in-law's palms come up and flatten against my chest. I watched my own body go backward. I watched my shoulder find the bracket. I watched the jars fall. One juror, a woman around 60, pressed her lips together hard. My son-in-law's attorney argued that the video lacked audio context, that the incident needed to be understood in the framework of a heated family disagreement, that my client regrets the physical contact, which was impulsive and not representative of his character. Gerald stood. We'd like to call Dennis Park. Dennis testified cleanly. No drama, no embellishment. Dates, locations, the parking structure, the ribs, the incident report he'd filed internally and been pressured to withdraw. He'd kept the original. He produced it. The defense attorney tried to shake him on the NDA. You're in violation of a legally binding agreement. Dennis looked at him. I'm testifying truthfully in a criminal proceeding about physical assault. That's a standard exception in the law. Your client should have read more carefully. I heard someone in the gallery cough to cover a laugh. Then Gerald said, We'd like to call a surprise witness, Your Honor. The witness made herself available this morning. The defense attorney objected immediately. This isn't on the disclosed list. She was listed as a potential witness in the original filing, Gerald said. And she came forward voluntarily, less than 48 hours ago. The judge, a methodical man in his late 50s, reviewed his notes. Overruled. Proceed. My daughter walked in from the side door. She was wearing her work clothes, charcoal slacks, and a white blouse, hair pulled back. She didn't look at her husband when she walked past him. She didn't look at me either. Not yet. She sat in the witness chair and folded her hands and looked at the prosecutor. Mrs. the prosecutor began. I'll go by my maiden name, she said. Caldwell. Claire Caldwell. The courtroom adjusted. My son-in-law's attorney wrote something fast on his legal pad. Miss Caldwell, you were present in the garage on the afternoon in question. I was. Can you describe what you witnessed? She was quiet for 3 seconds. I counted. My husband asked my father for money. My father said no. My husband pushed him into the shelving unit. My father hit the metal bracket on his right shoulder. 3 jars fell. 1 broke. My husband left without helping clean up. Her voice didn't shake. Not once. Why are you testifying today? She looked at her husband for the first time then. He was very still, because I spent 18 months telling myself his anger was about stress, about pressure, about everything except what it actually was. She looked back at the prosecutor. And because the last time I called my father and he answered, I told him his memory might not be reliable. And I've spent 3 weeks trying to live with having said that. My son-in-law stood, just slightly, halfway out of his chair. His attorney put a hand on his arm. She's coached, his attorney said. The judge's voice dropped to something that didn't need volume to be heard. Sit down, counsel, or you'll be excused. They sat. The verdict came back the same afternoon. Guilty of assault in the 3rd degree. The judge sentenced 90 days suspended pending completion of certified anger management coursework, 2 years probation, restitution of $4,200 covering my medical costs and lost work, and a protective order prohibiting contact with me for 18 months. My son-in-law stood in the courtroom with his hands at his sides. I watched his face for satisfaction and found none. He looked like a man who'd finally been told the truth about himself and didn't know what to do with it. I found my daughter in the marble hallway afterward, standing by a tall window with her arms crossed over her chest, looking out at the parking lot. I stood next to her. We didn't say anything for a while. She finally said, He moved out last week. I didn't know that. I didn't want you to know yet. She paused. I needed to do this without you knowing, so it was mine. I nodded. I understood that completely. Are you okay? She asked. My shoulder still aches some mornings, I said. But yeah, I'm okay. Are you? No, she said. But I will be. She said it the same way I'd said it to her when she was 12 and her dog died, and the world had just shown her for the first time that love doesn't guarantee permanence. We walked out together into the Denver November. Cold, bright, the kind of air that makes everything slightly more real than usual. 3 weeks later, I was back in my woodshop on a Saturday morning. Coffee on the workbench, Springsteen on the old Bluetooth speaker, shoulders still tender in the particular way of things that have healed most of the way. I was building a small bookshelf. Nothing dramatic. Pine boards, simple joints, something useful. My daughter let herself in through the side door the way she always had. She had coffee of her own. She sat on the tall stool she'd always used when she was a kid and watched me work for a while without talking. What are you building? She finally asked. Bookshelf, I said. For who? I measured a board. Hadn't decided yet. She looked around the shop. The mason jars back on the shelves. New ones, same spot. Every tool in its place. Dad, she said, I need to ask you something. I set the measuring tape down. When you handed him that box, she paused. Did you know it was going to go this way? All the way to court? All of this? I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I knew it was going to go somewhere. I just didn't know how far. Are you glad it did? I picked up the measuring tape again. Thought about Gerald's office, Dennis Park's folder, Francis Dominguez on the phone, my daughter on the witness stand. My wife's photo on the refrigerator, the jars on the floor. Yeah, I said. I'm glad. She nodded slowly. Me too, she said. Even though it's terrible and expensive, and I have to find an apartment and start over at 31. You're not starting over, I said. You're just starting. She made a face. That's unbearably corny, Dad. I know, I said. Your mother would have said the same thing. She laughed. The sound filled the shop. First time I'd heard her laugh in months. It sounded like something being repaired. I went back to measuring. She stayed on the stool. Neither of us needed to say anything else. Sometimes justice doesn't feel like winning. It feels like standing in your own garage on a Saturday morning, shoulder half healed, smelling like sawdust, listening to your daughter breathe in the next chair over. It feels like that. And it's enough. It's exactly enough. If this story meant something to you, please like this video and subscribe to Pure Revenge Stories. Leave a comment telling me what time it is where you are, and if you've ever had to stand your ground for your own dignity. Click the box on the left to hear the next story.